right. Getting closer to the time. Sebastiano, if you want to
Yes.
share the link already.
Yes.
And then I can also put it over on YouTube. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Here we go, 9:30, and we are complete. Hi, Amy.
There you
Hello.
go.
Right, thanks
You
for
have the paper.
paper. Put it here. There's the link. There we go. Okay, welcome to Neuroccino, everyone. Full house today. It is 9:30 on a Monday morning. That means we're going to review another paper for this week. And today we have Sebastiano, who is currently based in Bordeaux, present a paper on causation neuroscience. Sebastian, when you're ready, take it away.
Yes. Let me share the screen. Okay.
Can you
Okay.
zoom in a bit so we can see it in full screen?
Yes. You don't see it in full screen?
Well, we see a margin on the side. It'd be nice to just see the paper if possible. If not, don't worry about it.
That's strange because I
That's
see
fine.
that.
Yeah, it's fine.
Yeah. Can you see it?
Yeah.
Okay. So this is a paper about causation, as you can guess from the title. It's at the intersection of philosophy of science and neuroscience. And it has a lot of importance because we typically infer about causation to understand the brain. And so we should reflect sometime about what do we mean by causation and what terms we link to this causation term. And here, this is a paper by Ross and Bassett. It was published 2 months ago, I think. Was suggested kindly by Michelle. And yes, so the relevance is that we use very often the term mechanism to refer to causation. However, what we mean by that, it can differ depending on the interpretation of the neuroscientist. So there's a lot of to discuss about how we use this term. And we start the discussion about giving a brief overview of how we narrated the main meaning of mechanism. So what do we mean by mechanism? So we inherited the meaning of this term by 17th century philosophy like Descartes, Newton, and Boyle, where they argued that living systems are governed by small entities that mechanically interact through contact action to produce all system level outcomes. So you can already see there is a profound emphasis on a mechanistic perspective of living system. What does it mean? It's mostly related to action of small entities within a system. And so this 17th century mechanist framework has substantially influenced our science of today. So yes, so what we've done here, the authors, they have reviewed the different meanings of mechanism that are used in your science. So it turns out that there are different meanings. So we use the same term, but one may refer to one thing and the other may refer to another thing. So there is, we need to clarify first what do we mean by mechanism. And here they outline there are 3 different meanings that are typically used in neuroscience. And one is the narrow reductive use. Another one is the broad non-reductive. And then we have the non-causal use. So the narrow reductive is the one that is mostly assumed nowadays, and it's what we inherited from the 17th century idea of mechanism. So it's a mechanistic perspective about systems that are implemented underpinned by lower scale processes which interact in a action related fashion. So I guess we have some concrete example could be like the ion channels here, the right ion channel mechanism, receptor mechanism, diffusion mechanism, synaptic mechanism, and so on and so forth. So you can see there is a huge emphasis on small scale. So we describe system based on the smallest detail, basically, biologically speaking, and we also, there is again an emphasis on this mechanistic interaction to to explain the causal systems. So there are all very often used these terms forces, action, and motion. And this is very similar to what we would call machines. In fact, there's this metaphor that this view is gives this idea that systems behave like machines. Okay, so this is very reductive. So we reduce a causal system to its most simple and small scale entities, basically. Then we have a non-reductive view, and this it broadens the concept also to non-reductive systems. What does this mean? It relates basically to all causal systems. So here we have a few examples that we mention is that we include network mechanism, large-scale mechanism, system-level mechanism, circuit mechanism, global mechanism, top-down mechanism. As you can see, not all of these examples, they include a lower detail explanation of the causal system. So we go more to a higher level explanation of this causal system, and we omit all the small scale that was actually necessary in the reductive use of mechanism. As I forgot to say one thing, which is quite actually important, it's written here about the reductive assumption. It is believed that the more you increase the detail of the small scale relations, you can increase the explanatory power, which is written here. Okay, so back to the non-reductive. So you see here a few examples. So it broadens up the idea of mechanism to all causal system. We don't care about whether it's small scale, large scale, abstract, and so on and so forth. So here there's another example to consider reductive and non-reductive. Consider the distinction between knowing that brain area A causes outcome B, and knowing the causal details of how this outcome is produced. So you can see on the first, we have the non-reductive perspective, and the other side on the we have a reductive view of the mechanism. Okay, yes, well, it matters. It matters how we define, how we use a mechanism, as you can guess, because when there are like grant application, journal guidelines that define like a criteria, you should find the mechanism by which certain thing happen. Then we have to first understand what they mean by mechanisms, right? So here we have like what the National Institutes of Health refers to. We define a mechanistic trial as a study designed to understand biological or behavioral process of the pathophysiology of a disease or the mechanism of action of an intervention. So we consider a different level of refer to this broad sense of non-reductive causal systems. Okay, the last use that we make of mechanism is the most broad one. So basically this one refers to all systems. So there is no link anymore to causal system. It therefore includes also non-causal systems. And yeah, here they refer examples could be like topological mechanisms, entities that correlates, constitute, or realizes of macro scale system. So basically, as we all very much know, correlations and in general predictive model per se do not mean that there is a causal underlying relationship between the entities. So we can have a perfect mathematical description of a system, but it doesn't imply there is a causal relation. And so this is a really broad definition of what mechanism is used. Yes. Okay, oh yes, okay. So here we have a few examples. So let's get a bit more visual and concrete. Here we have on the left, we have the narrow mechanism concept. We have examples, ion channel mechanism. You can see that we reduce the outcome of a system as as caused by small scale details like the ion channel mechanism or the signal propagation mechanism, which are all viewed in a mechanistic point of view, which is the term that we typically expect in neuroscience, or at least the authors say that is typically expected. Then on the right, we have circuit mechanism and network mechanism. And yeah, you can see directly that here we are omitting all the small scale details that I just spoke about, and we abstract basically causal systems in by relating to circuits or network in these cases. Yeah, well, causation, I think you know what it means, but we can discuss on that further later. Okay, well, description, prediction are all synonymous of systems, but we do not imply there is a causation. So what are the challenges implications? So as you can guess, if I write in my paper mechanism, and another person write and I describe like network properties, and another person write also mechanism but describes like a lower scale details, then we may have different meanings, but if we don't specify it, then it's gonna cause some trouble. So there is a lack of clarity. We should always specify what we mean by mechanism, and we should not do miscommunication. So we should be very clear about what we're doing, especially, I mean, there was, I think the idea of correlation, neural correlates is quite obvious to that. And yes. So, yes, reductive assumptions. So in the neuroscience literature, there are suggestions that full, complete, or deep explanation require mechanistic or causal insights from a lower scale. In other words, it's often assumed that processes operating at the micro level are more mechanistically relevant. Alternatively, higher scale causal structure are viewed as more superficial, as lacking full or complete causal understanding. So here you can see already a bias. I mean, there is expectation that as reductive assumptions are more powerful in explaining in the brain, basically. However, and this is not the stance of the authors, and they say that they say basically that we should not stick. I mean, it's not like the reductive is the most powerful. Is that they explain phenomena from a different point of view. So yes, so confusion about causation, as I was saying at the beginning, mechanism depends on causation. right? So we have to first clarify what is causation and then talk about mechanisms. However, in this paper, we don't talk too much about causation. They leave it open to readers, actually. Okay, undesirable incentives. Like I said before, it's very much reworded. You can see it in grant call applications, journal guidelines, that they want you to discover some mechanism. But typically what is meant by mechanism is this reductive approach. And so here there is, of course, some dispute about that, what do we mean by mechanism, and are like more abstract causal system worthy of attention? Do they compete with more reductive explanation and so on and so forth? So how can we address these challenges? They suggest that first of all, we should drop the meaning of the non-reductive and the non-causal meaning of mechanisms because they're too broad. So basically, if we use them, we are so broad in the concept that we are under-specifying what we're actually doing. So it's not good for the communication with other people because other people may misinterpret what we're saying. Yes. Okay, well, and then we say, well, the first notional mechanism is quite clear, though. I mean, it has specific features like it focuses on small details. It has this mechanistic view of causal systems. And so we can keep that, they say, and yes, but they support the view, like I said before, like I mentioned before, is that the brain can be interrogated, understood, and modeled at different levels. The explanatory of descriptive framework, the most appropriate for one level, may not be best approximation for another. So this is really important. And yes, and they say, yeah, each meaning contains assumption incompatible with others, referring to the mechanism, meaning if mechanism is a causal concept, then the third usage is inappropriate. If mechanism means something beyond mere causality or causal system, then the second usage is overly flexible. Okay, yes, and then here we have some open questions, which I think they're really cool. Okay, so what should causation be? How should the causation be understood in neuroscience? So we should start from this one, probably. Does including lower scale causal information always improve explanation and understanding? This is expectation in the neuroscience field. What standards do legitimate causal, non-causal explanation need to meet? And do answers to this question distinguish causal models from models that are merely descriptive, predictive, descriptive, and classificatory. Okay, that's it.
Lovely. Thank you very much for presenting that paper. And are there questions? Yep, hands are going up. Lilith is the first one.
Hi, Sebastiano. Thanks so much
Hi.
for presenting this paper. It was an interesting one. I was just thinking about the second question, I think. If you down. No, not the second, I mean the second highlighted one. I
Oh, yeah?
think it really depends on I don't know. I think different people standing on different frameworks would answer differently. So if you are, let's say, kind of a continuation of Wundt's or Titchener framework, structuralism, I guess it's called, then you would say, yeah, the more detailed we would go, the better we'll understand the whole system. Like if we take the clock and we start to look at how it works under the clock, then we'll understand how the clock works. But then there is another, right, the opposing framework, like sort of Gestalt one that would say, no, we have to study the whole systems, and if we study the small systems, detailed ones, we would not understand it. Like, how can we understand what is a water if we just study the properties of oxygen and hydrogen? So, like these sort of things, it's the same here. I don't think we can actually say which one is correct since it's a long standing problem, right?
Yes.
So that's why I don't know. I was just a question that coming from myself. I didn't understand quite well the difference between um, broad
Okay.
explanation and the middle one.
Okay.
So
So
what
you
are
have
their assumptions? Like you said,
okay.
assumption of the first one that the details it's really important, but do
Yes.
the second and third one in their definition, do they also capture?
So they
Yeah.
say basically there is a hierarchical view about these terms because you start from mechanism the view that mechanism is a reductive that you have a reductive meaning. You start with a reductive meaning, then you go to a non-reductive meaning. What does it mean? That you refer, it's written here, the second use of mechanism is broad as it refers to a wide class of causal systems with different features. In some cases, this use mechanism is so broad it's simply synonymous with causation and applies to nearly any type of causal systems. So basically here they do, here there's a good example maybe. Consider the distinction between knowing the brain area A causes outcome B. So this is like the non-reductive assumption, and knowing the causal details of how this outcome is produced. This is the reductive assumption. And the third one is just about systems. So the third one is just saying, well, let's consider all model system and concepts, basically. So you include also non-causal systems that can be beautifully described from a mathematical point of view, but they do not imply causation. I don't know if I was clear.
No, yeah, okay, yeah. No, thank you. Yeah, it's something to think
Okay.
about. Yeah, thanks.
So it broadens basically. It includes more and more stuff as you go
Yeah,
up, basically.
but as I understand, it's still you cannot draw a parallel that the broad mechanistic explanation is like Gestalt. It's still going from details just a bit broaden it, right? So
Yes, yes.
okay, I get it. Thank you.
Can I just chip in? Is anyone surprised by the definitions of mechanism, or is that intuitive mechanisms for you, the definitions? Anyone? Because Michelle and I had a little discussion on the side, and mechanism to us, or he edited his comments, so now I'm not sure I'm representing his opinion, but mechanism to us was the idea that you explain the how-to, and that was basically it. Is that similar to the rest of the group, or are you not
But
surprised by
what do you mean by the definition of what is mechanism, if we are surprised with that?
so but fundamentally it raises the question of how what the meaning behind arbitrary words is, right? And you take an example like mechanism here, which I guess many of us thought we knew what mechanism actually means. But then you can see that there can be different interpretations or different definitions of the word.
No, yeah, in fact, it's I think it's a nice paper because it's kind of spotted the problem and it split it and described it in very details, dived into that one word basically. But I cannot say that I'm very surprised about this paper, that it is there, that it is describes all these different definitions, but knowing a bit background story of philosophy of psychology, it kind of nicely connected now. So it's kind of bridging the philosophy and history of psychology with nowadays. And that gap was not clear unless it is on the paper. So this is nice that they describe it. So, but yeah, I think there are lots of words that we are using and we think that there is a certain definition, but actually, yeah, for example, last time I also presented about the reorganization, and we saw that it's also people mean different things, and because of that, we confuse. We confuse and we think about that we're studying something, but actually no. And yeah, that's important to be aware of which words are we using, I guess. So as you.
Yeah, I think it does make a point on that.
Right, Michelle also has his hand up.
Yeah, I think join Lilith with that. It's a problem of any abstract words. Any abstract words got a loose definition that can be interpreted differently by different people. But in the context of mechanisms, because I read it in advance, I was like, oh, how can I replace this word mechanism by another word? And you'll be like, let me explain to you how it works, instead of let me explain to you the mechanism. But here, what is stressed is like, our mechanism in itself does not explain the mechanism, which is, let me explain how it works, doesn't explain to you how it works. I don't see any scientific paper stating that they found the mechanism and not explaining what the mechanism is after that. So that's why I'm very surprised by, like the discussion that is in this manuscript. Nobody can just give you mechanism and let it hang in the scientific description, just like that. Now for the grant, it's true, like maybe if they define better what is a mechanism, especially when they want to reject grant, saying like, well, your grant does not gonna explain the mechanism. It would be good that they give a good definition there, I think. And I took some note about this paper. Another thing that I was like a little surprised with is, so like the only solution is to define what the mechanism is. Most of the way people use mechanisms is to imply a hierarchy between cause and effect, which you mentioned is very reductionist.
Yes.
If you start explaining how something works, you have an origin and a termination of a process. And this is very, really simplifying the system. What do you think?
The question was oriented to me.
In general, I mean,
Okay.
But maybe Chris has something to say.
Sure.
Chris.
So where does emergence lie in the definitions of mechanisms? Because is it actually a cause? Is it an effect? But it's still used by some researchers to explain how things are processed in the brain. So I'm a little bit afraid that some of these definitions might be fine for most cases, maybe, but there might be some breaking points, and it's often the case with definitions, and as it was mentioned, with words that are tricky to define, right?
Yes, but I think I don't know if they actually want to really define. I think what they're actually doing, they're reviewing what typically research mean by mechanism. So they say, well, we all use this term mechanism. Let's review. Let's try to cluster the papers and try to understand what they mean actually by mechanism. And so I think this pops out from that, I think.
But then in their clustering of meanings, emergence could lie in several boxes, no?
Yes.
And other things,
Yes.
it's not only emergence, but like if you go a little bit lower in the even in the network interactions, you could also see different like different boxes where that would lie in the definition of a mechanism.
Yes, that's true. Yeah.
So we last week had an interesting discussion as well, where the consensus in the end was that whenever you write a paper, you should start with defining how you interpret the terms. So are we basically then moving into a time where every paper has to have a preface of a glossary, basically, of this is what I mean by this term?
Good luck defining what is consciousness and attention.
That would be really useful because you don't have to define it if you you don't have to define it in the global sense. If you give your definition, if you give your meaning at the beginning of the paper, then you can't say, oh, but that's not what consciousness is. But if I mean, of course, you don't want to abuse and saying, well, consciousness is something that is completely irrelevant. But still, I mean, that would be probably thrown away if by the reviewers if they were doing that. But still, that would be useful because at least you would know what part of the meaning you're using.
But then we could also end up with like gazillion of definitions.
Yeah.
I mean,
You have to find a balance.
But that would help finding a consensus as well, because then if a lot of papers are using the same definition, you could say, well, it's the consensus is more towards this definition or not. And that could be useful for grants as well. That would be really nice to have like a feedback process where you have a grant a proposal, a grant like where you apply. They have the grant description, and then you could say, well, what do you mean by mechanism if you want me to explain the mechanisms, or what do you mean by consciousness? And that would avoid the problems of submitting something that is out of scope in the mind of the finance institution.
Yes.
But you would probably end up with a definition per domain. So we recently went through this exercise trying to find a consensus across different domains to make funder happy. And it took us a while to realize that we're actually talking using the same words, but meaning completely different concepts behind it. And that was things like agency, or language for that matter. So we had very different definitions. At some point, we had to sit down and just define to each other what we actually mean when we use those terms. So it's a good exercise.
A grant doesn't have to be to give a consensual definition. They could say that's what we mean by consciousness. So your application must talk about this definition of consciousness, not another one.
Yeah, that's true. It was interesting to see that it's domain specific, and we're not even talking about completely diverging domains. We're talking about domains that are happily coexisting next to each other and quite close, yet the definition of the terminology is different.
but I don't think it's even possible to get a consensus.
Yeah.
Why
I
is
mean,
that?
huh?
Why is that?
Well, if in philosophy there is no consensus and psychology is coming from philosophy, how is it possible that psychologists will figure things out? I mean, if from philosophical standpoint, there are thousands of definitions of consciousness, and then a neuroscientist would come and write, okay, this is what I think about consciousness. And there are other people coming from different frameworks. How would they make a consensus that fundamentally they are thinking in different ways?
Fair point. I can see that we can carry on this conversation for a very long time, but we're actually out of time already. So thank you very much for choosing that paper to present. Good to see you all, and see you next Monday morning for the next Neuroccino. Have an exciting week in science. Bye.
See you.
Bye.